Hello, class, and welcome to our pre recorded lecturette on our topic for this week. So, I would suggest that as you watch this video, you may also open your notes so that you will be guided as to the contents and with the outline of our lesson. Okay, so now let's begin. Let's start. So for this week, we're going to talk about research. Okay, sorry. Okay. We're going to talk about research variables. Okay. So remember that when we say research variables, from the name itself, variable, we extract the root word vary, okay, which means changing. All right. So that is the root word here that we have for variable. And since it is changing, it is not constant, and it continues to have different values, different levels, or different types. That's when we say vary or variable. But what is varying or what is changing in variable? So to be exact, in research, in the context of research, variable here focuses on the changing qualities or characteristics. Okay, of what? Okay, this refers to changing qualities, characteristics of, okay, people, of what else? Of things, or of phenomenon. Okay, or of the phenomenon itself. So that's what we mean when we say variable, changing qualities or characteristics. So what are these characteristics or qualities that are changing? So let's say, for example, we could give examples such as, let's say, age. So let's have examples here. So first, we have your age. Isn't it that we grow old and people have various ages? Like me, I'm already on my early 30s. You're already on your late 20s. So it's a changing quality. Oh, sorry. Then we could also have your color. All right. So there is no one color that exists in the world. So there are various colors depending on the spectrum and on the appearance of a certain thing. Okay, so color, age. What other examples can we give? We could also say your, for example, your score. Yes. Diba? If you're going to submit your modules, your teacher will grade your module and your score would vary. Not everyone will get the same score. But if you've noticed, these variables here, guys, or class, may be quantitative or qualitative in nature. Now, what do we mean by that? Okay, let's say, for example, your age. Can we count age? Yes. So this is a quantitative variable because it can be counted or you can quantify that. Your score, can you quantify your score? Yes. So this is also a quantitative variable or you could count that. But color here is qualitative because you cannot count color, but you can classify them or you can categorize them. So that is a qualitative variable. So that means your variables can be both applied or can be both put into the context of quantitative and qualitative research. Okay, so that's what we mean when we say variables. Now let's talk about the different types or classification of variables. Okay, so let's talk about, okay, let's change color. Okay, let's have this. Okay, so let's go to the different classification of variables. So we mentioned already that your variable can be both qualitative or quantitative. And so, as we discuss our classification of variables, we're going to learn more about these qualitative and quantitative variables. But then, we will be classifying our variables according to, okay, its nature, all right, and then how it is used in the different types of studies, okay? So we have first, okay, let's first enumerate the three classification of your variables. So first, we classify our variables according to either numeric and categorical variables. Okay, so we have here numeric and categorical variables. And then also, we also have another classification, which is your experimental and non-experimental variables. Okay, and then our last is, of course, your other types of variables. So we will discuss them one by one. Other types of research variables. Okay, so there are three classification of variables, your numeric and categorical variables, your experimental and non-experimental variables, and of course, your other types of variables. So let's begin with the first, which is our, okay, numerical. So let's talk now about your numerical and categorical variables. Okay, so numerical, of course, from the name itself, numerical, we are pertaining it to numbers. And when we say categorical, we are talking about categories or classification. So to put it simply, when we say numerical variable, we are describing how many or how much a certain quality is. Okay? And so therefore, because we can count them, it is assuming a quantitative nature. On the other hand, categorical variables are variables that values that describes a quality or characteristics. So in here, we are more concerned with what type. Okay. So we are concerned with what type, all right? Or when we say what kind, what kind, or in some aspects, we could also say here, which category. Okay. Therefore, having to consider the type, the kind, and the category, categorical variables assumes or assume your qualitative nature. Okay. All right. So do not forget that these variables are assuming also your nature, and we also have to look into its nature and into its okay, into its nature and into its how we classify or how we categorize these variables. Okay, now let's continue on with okay our specific types under our numerical and categorical variables. Okay, so we have here our continuous versus discrete variables. So what are the differences, or what are the differences between the two? So continuous versus our discrete variables. Okay, continuous variable versus discrete variable. Now remember that when we say continuous variable, they take an infinite number on the value that can occur within a certain population. So this is infinite number, meaning there is no limit. Okay. The varying quantity of a certain quality, or of a certain thing, or of a certain number doesn't have any limit. So it has an infinite number. So therefore it is considered a continuous variable. While on the other hand, discrete variables can either be, okay, take notice of this one, class. Do not be confused, because a discrete variable can be both numerical or categorical in nature. So this can be numerical and categorical in nature. So we will know later that the discrete variable can actually assume a categorical nature, and it can also assume a numerical nature. But to have a clear, how do I say this one? Okay. To have a clear understanding of the numerical nature first, because we're talking about continuous variable being an infinite number, and it takes numerical gini siya. Your continuous variable is actually numerical by nature again. Okay. It is numerical by nature. So a numerical variable can be both continuous and discrete. And the numerical nature of a discrete variable talks about having to set limits. Okay, so if in a continuous variable it follows an infinite number or no limit of values, your discrete numerical variable carries in itself limit. Okay, it only it has limits. So what are some of the example of discrete numerical variables? So we could have here, based on your notes, we can see there the number. Okay, so examples given under your discrete numerical variable, we have your number of registered cars. So, for instance, you go to the Land Transportation Office in Bacolod City, you could ask how many registered cars are there. So, there is only a certain number of limit. Nah? And then also, we also have here, okay, we also have under your discrete numerical variable, number of children in the family. You cannot have infinite number of children, right? Okay, in a family. So that could also mean a numerical discrete variable. Okay. Also, like for example, in your section, so the number of students, okay, in a class is also considered a discrete numerical variable. Likewise, if we wanted also to create a scope or a certain limit lang from a population, let's say in Bacolod City, and then you would only include those certain barangays, okay, and the population of that barangay. So it's considered a continuous sorry, it's a discrete, discrete numerical variable. Okay, now let's go back to the continuous variable naman. So we said, well, we mentioned earlier that this can be limitless or infinite number. And one another particular characteristic of your continuous numerical variable is that it can be, okay, please take note of this, can be divided or expressed in fractions. And it takes an absolute zero value. Okay? Absolute zero. Mhm. So it takes an absolute zero value. Mm. So ano naman niya, or what are the examples of your continuous variable, continuous numerical variable? So we have the number examples here will now be, okay, your time. Okay, like say for example, because there's an infinite number of time, like 2 hours, 3 hours, or let's say 30 years, 40 years, and it could really go beyond. Height and weight as well can also be. Okay. And of course, we have an example to age. But sir, okay, so here comes now the argument. Now, sir, the height and weight, there's only like a certain limit to that. Like a particular person can only reach, let's say, this height or this weight. Yes, there is a certain limit. But if we are going to consider, let's say, all other variables ideal, a certain weight of a person or a certain height can actually go on and go through. Okay. So when you say continuous, okay, here, let's not, in order for us to avoid confusion regarding the absolute or the infinite quality or the infinite characteristic of a continuous variable, let's not really be too philosophical about it, but rather let's take it in such a way that there is no, you do not put a certain limit with this kind of variables. That means you don't say, okay, you stop there. Okay, we only count the variable until here. No, if you say that, let's say for example, if mabaka nga, we only count the variable until here or only until here, then it is considered as your discrete because you set a limit, you set a range. But then, for example, all right, so you can go beyond, reach the optimum number or the optimum value that you could reach depending on your nature, or depending on the situation, or depending on the various elements in that phenomenon, or in that certain thing or a person, then you are setting a continuous variable. Tandaan that the major difference between continuous and discrete numerical variable is that in your discrete, okay, in your discrete, you set limit or you set a range. While in continuous, there is no limit. Okay, so you could go beyond as long, or you could stretch the value until it reaches its optimum threshold. So you do not put limit as to where the value should only be set in. Okay? So I hope that's clear. And let's proceed to our categorical variables in our next video.